Hey guys, today we're going to review Act 2 here in Death Must Die after beating Darkness 100 with all of the available characters. So we're going to break this down into four major sections. Firstly, we're going to talk about the new content itself, so the new map, new enemies, bosses, the new god Ninh, and the new character Lorien. Secondly, we will talk about the new player experience and the early game. Third, we want to go into progression, gear, and character building. And lastly, I do want to talk about difficulty, Darkness 100, and all that stuff as well. Now, before we get into it, this will be a bit of a longer discussion type of video. So if you want to pop it on in the background, like a podcast episode or something like that, that's probably the way to do this on, or grab yourself a drink. Now, I also do want to note first and foremost, this is an early access game. If I am critical of anything, it is from the perspective of this is an early access game. This is a small team, and they're doing a really great job overall, I think. So please be aware that we are coming at it from that kind of perspective. So let's first start with the new content, right? So Act 2, the new map, I think is fun and challenging. I quite like it. So it's a desert theme, endless desert. We have the flying carpet, we have genies, we have, all this type of stuff. And the map is quite challenging. I think it does take some time to actually learn and progress through this map. So, the first time you play, you'll probably come across, I don't know, maybe the ape enemies or the cats or something, and they might just annihilate you. And then okay, well, then I have to learn, have to learn how to dodge their attacks, what the strengths and weaknesses of the enemies are, and I also have to gear up a bit to actually beat Act 1. So I think from that perspective, I think I enjoyed Act 2 quite a bit. Obviously, there are some, differences between Act 1 and Act 2. Act 1 had more like horde waves and stuff like that. So the slimes and all these skeletons coming at you right at the end, which, is really, really cool. But, I think Act 1 and Act 2 feeling a bit different, I think is okay as well. But we'll get a bit more into that later. Let's talk about the new enemies. So, as some of these enemies are really, really tough. And it's sort of one of the big differences between Act 1 and Act 2 is there are a lot of targets in Act 1 that are more like high health single targets as opposed to these big horde waves. These some of these enemies can be super, super lethal too. Like obviously the one that comes to mind are the ants, but there are some of the other enemies too, like in Wave 5, they introduce these dog type enemies that have these scythe hands, and oh boy, they're fast and they can do a lot of damage. As you go on, there are some other interesting enemies. The flying carpet dudes, I think, are really cool. I like them, even though the bombers can be pretty tough, especially if you don't have the best build when you hit 16 minutes. But I think they're cool. I like them. I think they're fun. The main enemy that I think frustrates most people is the ants. Maybe we'll get onto that a bit later too, but I think the bosses are really cool in here too. The first boss I think is really good. He summons this big puddle of poison and it slowly, moves around trying to track you. Then he'll nerf your dashes and then spawn a bunch of enemies right on top of you. Now, sometimes that can be a little bit frustrating if you get stuck and he just spawns, 20 enemies on top of you or whatever, but overall, I do like the boss design here. I think it's pretty good. I think it's interesting. And it also allows you to sort of take advantage of some of the mechanics in the game to, I wouldn't say cheese it, but kind of intentionally, you can put retribution on and stand in his puddle, that sort of thing. That's pretty cool, I think. The second boss is kind of interesting. On some builds, it feels really easy. On some other builds, she feels kind of really hard. And this is the ant lady. She has, what is it, 3 or 4 helpers who buff her. Once you kill them, though, she's actually a bit easier to take out. Man, if you don't have enough DPS, though, and you have a pretty squishy build, she's going to annihilate you. There are some builds that just cannot get past her, whereas some other builds, she's actually the easiest of all the bosses, which is kind of interesting. I don't know. The third boss is the Jin. He's pretty tough. He is obviously the final boss of Act 2. On Darkness Zero, it took me a while to actually beat him for the first time. I can't remember exactly how many runs it took me, but I did have to gear up a bit and I did have to learn the map. Boy, oh boy, he can be tough on higher darkness levels, though. because he has more damage and health and all that, and he'll just spam the field with just tons of fire and all this stuff. But like I said before, I think that overall this map has a different feel and sort of vibe to it than Act 1, and I think that's really cool. I prefer the acts feeling a bit different, and I know, like I said before, the Horde waves are kind of the one thing that I've heard of a bit of feedback on, like, oh, we like the Horde waves, and so do I, I think the Horde waves in Act 1 are really cool. But I do like the fact that Act 1 and Act 2 do feel a bit different, right? And I think if you're going to have 5 acts in this game by the time you hit 1.0, I think having the acts feel a bit different as you go is a strong point here. So let's talk about Nin, the new god. So new god was introduced in this Act 2 update, Nin. Now she's the god of Earth. She is pretty powerful. She's super, super powerful. They gave her probably the strongest strike and cast currently in the game. So Landslide is the cast and Earth Spike is the strike. Earth Spike has insane base damage. It scales up so high, especially when you put some strike damage on your gear and then level up any... if you get a purple or a master level, it does so much base damage. And Landslide, man... Landslide has a long cooldown, but on Maris when you can just spam it, or even cast Lorien where you can spam it, boy oh boy is Landslide powerful. Some of her other skills, though, do feel a bit undertuned. Like something like the Rock Hands, for example. They feel like it's interesting and it's cool and it's novel. And on the lower darkness levels, you can totally sort of rock it and make it work. But man, when you're going up the higher difficulty levels, these Rock Hands feel pretty weak and they have a really long cooldown. So again, if you're not on a class who can spam the casts, man, it's not even up half the time. So it's like, oof, I don't know. Likewise, the dash. I don't think her dash feels that great. It's cool conceptually, and the idea of being able to sort of block off a bit of, a section of the map and make the enemies have to travel around and that sort of thing, it is cool on paper, but in practice, you end up getting caught more on your own rock dash than the enemies. I think it would be cool if they actually allowed you to dash through the rocks and smash them and deal AoE damage like that. I think that would be more interesting than the way it currently stands right now. I feel like I get caught up on my rocks more than anything, which is one of the reasons I don't actually use the dash. It does have pretty high base damage, but man, and some utility, but yeah, I don't know. It just ends up feeling kind of bad compared to some of the other dashes in the game. She currently only has 1 legendary at the moment too, and no summon. So I think they're going to be adding some more stuff to Nin as we go on here, and probably in the balance pass we'll see some changes as well. But only having 1 in the legendary, it's Quake. It is a pretty good legendary. It'll stun and deal a bunch of damage to all the enemies. It is quite useful. However, it is the only one at the moment, and she has no summon. So if you want to go a summoning build, definitely don't pick Nin. She does also have area utility blessings though, so power area and attack area and that sort of thing. On some of the characters, this can be really, really strong, especially the really, really close range characters. They need all the help they can get. Skadi, we'll get into this further as we go on, but Skadi and Nixie right now, man, attack area on them feels pretty essential. I don't know, like. Overall, I think Nin does feel really powerful, but I think she needs a balance pass too. I think, as much as it sort of pains me to say, I think I think Landslide and Earth Spike are kind of maybe too strong, and some of her other ones I feel like maybe need to come up a bit. So I think Nin does need a bit of a balance pass here, but then again, so do some of the other gods. So let's talk about Lorien, the new character they added in Act 2. He's an archer. Boy, oh boy, Lorien is S tier in my opinion. He is the strongest character in the game. He has a crazy powerful skill tree. It's not just about the skill tree though. By nature of being a ranged archer, he can just sit back and plink away the enemies, whereas a lot of the other characters have to get up close. Especially the melee characters, Averon, Nixie, and Skadi. Now, Kront has more, attack area in his skill tree, so he can sort of get away with it a bit more, and he has, War Chief, which is, crazy as well. Lorien, though, the ease of use is one of the sort of big things here. Also, the range of his his attacks, and you can just buff it significantly too in his skill tree, which is pretty crazy. But not only did they give him like one of the strongest skill tree specs, man, Basking Greatness, you can just spam your strikes everywhere, and it's so easy because he gets crit chance from his skill tree, but you can just stack on a bunch of crit chance on your gear too. You don't even need that much, to be honest. You only really need to add maybe one or two pieces to really take advantage of Basking Greatness. But the other thing that makes Lorien so strong, they gave him this weapon called the Golden Bow. Now, if you've watched any of my previous content with Lorien in it, you know that I basically never take this thing off. The Golden Bow is probably the most powerful weapon in the game, in my opinion. 20% Master offers is just... Man, it's just pretty crazy. I don't know. Yeah, 20% Master offers in a single item is just nuts. And only having one character that has access to that sort of potent level of Master offers is it's a massive balance issue, I think, you know. Now, I just want to make one thing really clear here. I really like Lorien. He's fun to play. He's powerful. You know, he looks cool. He feels good to play, all that stuff, right? But the way Lorien was introduced, I think, is bad for the game. I think when you introduce a new character and you have 2 or 3 of your old characters feeling trash in comparison, I think it's a big mistake. Now, obviously, they're going to do a balance pass at some point, right? I understand that, but I don't think, even in an early access period, I don't think it's great to introduce a new character and have it be, like, I don't know, 20 or 30-fold stronger than some of these other characters, and I'm not even really exaggerating. You take Skadi compared to Lorien. Lorien has range, he has ease of use, he has master offers, he has strike spam, he has cast spam, he has... I mean, he just has everything going for him, and Skadi's over here just feeling sad in the corner. Like, I think it's bad for the game to introduce a new character and have them be so bonkers level strong compared to everything else. I don't know. I think that's something they need to consider for next time they introduce a new character. Obviously you want the new character to feel fun and powerful, right? But I don't think the new characters should outshine old characters by such a significant margin. I think it's a big mistake to do that. And I guess we'll see how they go with balancing, come the September balance patch. So, depending when you watch this, maybe that's already happened. I don't know, but I guess we'll see. Now, I wanted to go on to the new player experience in the early game. I think the new player experience could use some work here. Now, not even from a new player, even from a player who played some of Act 1. I only played maybe 30 hours of Act 1 before I got into Act 2. Even from that perspective, when I started leveling up Lorien, it took me, I don't know, 5 or 6 runs before I even had a bow drop. So I was going the whole time without a weapon, and I'm just sitting here like, like, what is going on? Like, why can I not get a weapon on this character? And eventually I got the sharpshooter as my first weapon for Lorien, which is a unique blue. It's actually quite a powerful weapon, which was really cool, but to go 5 or 6 rounds without ever seeing a weapon, I think it's weird. It's kind of, I don't know. I understand it's RNG. It's a loot RNG game, but man, you're just limiting what you can do so much by not having a weapon equipped. It's kind of weird. I don't know, but from the actual new player experience, I think this is a problem as well, because even if you start on Avron or choose Meris or whoever, you unlock that you like, the same problem still exists. You can go round after round without seeing items drop. You can even go 10 rounds without filling out all your gear slots if you're super, super unlucky, right? Obviously, the RNG, you can get really lucky too, and you might have, an insane unique drop for you straight away, which, can happen too, which I like some RNG. I like the fact that something cool could drop for you early on. I do like that, but also playing run after run and having item slots missing, I think is not great. I think they should change that. I'm not sure exactly what approach they would take. Maybe after your first 3 runs, I don't know, maybe you're guaranteed to have a weapon drop or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what approach they would take there, but I think something needs to change there now. Now, so this next point is both good and bad. I think the game doesn't really explain its systems very well. I think this can be both positive and negative. The reason I say it can be positive is it does allow for player discovery, which I think is really good. And I think you need that in this type of game. You need that sort of feeling of, yes, the more I play, the more I'm understanding things, and the more I play, the more I feel like I'm, progressing and learning and all that sort of thing, right? So I do think that is important, but vagueness also can be a turn off, especially early game when someone is trying to get into your game and man, they don't even know that there's a skill tree system. Like I've seen that feedback from some people. They didn't even realize there was a skill tree system, right? And they've unlocked it. They've just never gone over that, and. So I do think the early game could use a bit of work for these sorts of features. Will people fall off, right? Like in that early game, will people give up because the game's too vague? I actually don't know the answer to that, but I think some of the systems could be a little bit better explained early game. I think that is fair. Now, I personally really like playing this game without looking things up, right? I did that for several hundred hours. For at least like 200 hours before I started looking anything up online. Now, I personally find that to be more satisfying. I like learning. I like the trial and error of throwing builds up against the run, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, looking at different loot pieces, seeing what different affixes roll, all that sort of thing. I personally enjoy that. I just think maybe early game you need to maybe just explain a couple of things a bit clearer, like skill tree system and progression and how that sort of stuff works. But I also think you need to leave room for player discovery, like we talked about. So I don't know the perfect answer or solution here, but I do think it needs a bit of work. Now, for me personally, I really like loot games. Loot games are some of my personal favorite games in all of gaming. So for me, when I first started to get into Death Must Die, and I got into the loot system, I was like ooh, blue, ooh, and then I got a purple, and that progression to me feels really good. The first time you see a mythic or a unique drop and it has a really cool affix on it or something really useful, that's a good feeling, right? And then once you deck yourself out with several uniques or a bunch of mythics, and you actually start to build something that can take on Act 2, I think that feels really good. I think finding new gear overall feels decent. I think right now there's a lot of RNG, and sometimes you just can't get items that actually boost your power. Like you can go several runs without taking some items that really boost your power, you know what I mean? Without finding any items, I should say, that really boost your power in any sort of meaningful way. So there is some RNG there now. I do know that they've said that they are improving their item generation in an upcoming patch too. So perhaps this point won't be so much of an issue in the future, and that's cool. If it is, that's awesome. But right now, yeah, man, there are some loot items that drop that you just look at and you're like, these stats do nothing for me. And I guess they exist so you can sell them, get some economy going, and buy some stuff from the shop, right? So I understand that. Now, for me personally, I didn't mind it being a little slower like that because, as I said, I like the build crafting and the loot and that sort of thing. We are going to get more into that in the next section, though, so... Now, one of the other feedback points I have seen from some folks online is the character skill points being pretty slow to acquire. I'm not sure how new players really feel about that. So this is one thing that I'd be interested to know from you guys, if you feel like this is too slow or if this is okay. For me personally, I thought it was okay on my first two characters. And then I sort of felt like, man, I wish I just had all the skill points for the other characters. Because what ends up happening is once you've grinded on one character and you have some decent gear that you can pass over to your other characters, Darkness Zero actually becomes relatively easy. Now, I'm talking about when you have some mythics and some uniques, right? And then it just sort of feels like a formality. Okay, I have to now run through Act 2 4 times over to collect my 36 skill points. Oh, maybe 5 times over then, if my math is my math is failing me there. And that ends up sort of feel like, oh man, I have to do this on each character. It sort of ends up feeling a little repetitive. So maybe they could speed it up once you've gotten one of your characters or two of your characters maxed out or something like that. Maybe they could consider speeding that up. I'm not sure. That is one thing that, I'd like to hear your feedback on personally. But yeah. So it ended up just feeling like, oh, I have to speed run Darkness Zero like 4 times, 5 times on each character to sort of, make progress feel a bit easier, so I can actually start tinkering with the end game builds that I actually want to tinker with. You know what I mean? Now in the background, you've been seeing some Skadi attempts I did on Darkness 100 using various different specs. I think this one we were doing with the heroic training spec, which is interesting, but also, man, it just doesn't feel super strong in the current patch. So let's talk about gear and character building and all that sort of stuff. So in my opinion, probably the strongest aspect of the game right now, aside from, the gameplay loop feeling fun, the actual moment-to-moment gameplay feeling good, aside from that, I think the game's strongest point right now is the loot and the character building. You really have to make some meaningful choices when you're gearing out your character, especially as you're going up the higher difficulty levels. Now, on Darkness Zero, once you got mythic gear, it's not that crazy or anything. You can probably stomp it, but as you go up towards Darkness 100, or even out up to Darkness 50 or whatever, you really have to start making some meaningful choices. Do I need to put regen? Do I need to put some regen on my gear? Do I need to trade that out for damage output? Which stats are currently synergizing with my skill tree? What God Blessings do I intend to take with this build, and what can synergize with those? So, also, it's quite important as you go higher up the darkness levels, you are going to need some HP, right? You can't just go in with 50 HP. Like, good luck if you do that, right? So I think, actually having to make meaningful choices on your gear, I think is really, really interesting, and probably, in my opinion, the best part of the game. At least it feels like the most balanced and polished part of the game. To me currently, aside from, as I said, the moment-to-moment gameplay feels good too. So, but for me personally, going into Darkness 100, tinkering around with the build, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, and then sort of going back out, trying something different, rinse, repeat, I personally find this really satisfying. I really liked the progression from the blues to purples to mythics. I think the power level that it sort of gives you and the progression there, I think feels good. But more importantly, figuring out what is good and what stat combos actually exist on your gear and what works for your class. I think all of that stuff, I think, is really pretty well done in the game right now. Like, it's pretty finely balanced. Obviously, there are some gear affixes that are stronger than others, right? Especially as you go up to Darkness 100. Something like Master and Legend offers become such a powerful stat to have. Especially in the current patch of the game where things like God of War and Inner Peace and stuff like that are just really, really strong. Man, Crom with God of War and Fatality together, man, anyone who's using an attack will just automatically will want to take Crom because it's just so strong to have those two together on any attacker. Now, I did mention something earlier, like I prefer not to sort of look things up for this game, right? I personally find it really fun to figure this stuff out on my own, right? And I actually spent quite a bit of time in here thinking that there was a bug with the gods. I even made a video on it saying I'd like to see it change, which, you guys had some good feedback on that one. And, maybe my idea wasn't perfect or anything like that, but I still think it is an issue having the fates be guaranteed as the fourth god, because even though, stuff like Lifeline and First Strike and Fleet-footed, those three, every class likes those, right? More damage is more damage, more dashes is good, and more life is more life, right? But I still think a character like Lorien just synergizes better with the fates because of their blessings like Gemini and attack crit chance and that sort of stuff. Lorien leans into what the fates have to offer so much compared to some of the other characters. And I still think that is a bit of an issue. Regardless of the fact that maybe my idea of having 4 gods might make getting your blessings a bit more difficult, I understand that. So maybe my solution isn't perfect, but I do think it is a balance issue that really they do need to sort of think about. Man, anything that makes Lorien even more S tier is just like, man, oof, I don't know. I think it needs. I think the balance here needs some work. But I do consider that a balance sort of issue, right? And there is a balance pass coming, so in early September. So I hope we will see some changes there. Yeah. Eventually, I did start looking some things up though. After 200 hours or whatever, just to make sure the certain stats do certain things, or I was checking to see if Maris had any weapons that have master offers on them, which she does not apparently. So one of the other things I want to talk about in this section is RNG in general in this game. So there is quite a bit of RNG. So your god blessings will roll randomly, and your gear drops are random, and the affixes that roll on them are also random, unless we're talking about uniques, then they're obviously set. But I think the RNG is a little bit too heavy right now. It's not so extreme that I don't want to play the game or anything like that, but I think searching for specific gear rolls on some of these pieces is really, really hard. Now, I've mentioned this in another video, but I've played Act 2 for more than 300 hours, and I've only ever seen 2 pairs of boots with summon movement speed, just for an example, right? This is a crucial stat to have if you want to make a summoning build, and it's so rare. It's insanely rare to find this one affix. Now, feet can roll a lot of different things, right? They can roll dash charges, they can roll dash, just damage in general, they can roll life, and they can roll these curses and everything. So there's quite a lot of stuff there that they can roll. I think they have mentioned the item generation, right? So hopefully this is something that is sort of looked at when they do improve the item generation, as I think right now you have to wade through a lot of trash items to find the goods. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes that can be a bit frustrating. I think sometimes that can turn some people off too. So for me personally, I've enjoyed grinding and looking for certain items. It does get to a point though where I still can't find certain rolls on certain pieces. I'm like, wow, I've played for so long now and I'm just not getting, some of these gear rolls. So I think some people might find it frustrating or hard to get the gear that they want, so they might get frustrated over that, To that end, I think some kind of crafting system in this game would be really, really awesome moving forward. Now, I'm not sure exactly what form it would take if they did implement one. Either it would be maybe an affix reroll type system where you could choose one of the affixes on your gear to reroll, or maybe it would be like an upgrade system, like an infusion type system where you can upgrade tier 1 to tier 2 or something like that. There is the other point there where all the Mythic Tier 1 items are now obsolete because Mythic Tier 2 just have better stats. So, at that point, it's like, well, there's no reason to ever equip any of the Tier 1 items unless they're uniques that have something special associated with them. Or one of the other things they might do is some of the gear pieces can roll with like an additional affix that isn't just like a stat, it's like a perk or an ability, like, the Meteor Shower one, for example, or like the Curses for another example. Maybe if we could re-roll that in particular to choose which one we put on there. Now, I'm just not sure exactly what form they would want to take if they really went down that route, but I do think some kind of crafting system in this game would be really, really fun. And increase the longevity too, I reckon. So, why not? All right, last up here, I just want to talk about the difficulty progression and Darkness 100. So, boy, Darkness 100 is wildly unbalanced right now. I apologize if you just heard a cargo pilot. Man, that was loud. So, Darkness 100 is wildly unbalanced right now. Some of the characters and some of the blessings from these gods are just way stronger for Darkness 100 than others. Now, there's always going to be some natural variation, right? But man, some of the character builds right now, there are probably like 3 or 4 in particular. Like, Cast Spam Meris, War Chief, Stomp Kront, and Basking Greatness Lorien are the three ones that come, to mind. They sit in this tier above everything else because they just make the game really easy. It's easy mode, right? Whereas some of the other characters, boy, Nixie and Scarly, like I mentioned before, they are desperate need of huge buffs here. Man, they just don't feel good at Darkness 100. In fact, it's frustrating because I like using different characters. I like them as characters, and even their skill tree, they sound interesting. Like Poison Darts Nixie or Shadow Step Nixie or, Status Effects Scardy. They sound cool, but when you're actually going up against Darkness 100, they are so difficult to get the win on compared to Lorien, Maris, and Kront. Yeah, Averon sort of sits a little bit in between. He has some good specs, but he's also not super powerful for Darkness 100, but he's not as weak as Scardy and Nixie, so... Yeah, but Lorien is just like silly easy mode like we talked about before. We don't need to get too much more into Lorien right now. But there are some waves on Darkness 100 here that just feel kind of BS too, like the ants at wave 11. I think this is the wave that everyone complains about. It is, man, these enemies are just crazy. Unless you have a build that can literally dink them in 1 or 2 hits or a second or so, they can take you from full health to 0 health in a matter of like 2 or 3 seconds. Not only that, on some of the melee characters, someone like Scardy can't catch up to these ants. They zip away too quickly. And Scardy is such a close range character that it's like, man, I can't kill them. I literally just can't get close to them. And again, it's another reason why Lorien's SC. He just sits at the back, just blinks away. Especially if you have Crom, just fatality, just boom, one shot him, move on with your day. You know what I mean? So it's pretty crazy. So Darkness 100 is wildly unbalanced right now, but at the same time, I find Darkness 100 super fun, and build crafting for Darkness 100, I personally find really satisfying. Now, is it satisfying on Scardy and Nixie right now? No. But overall, I do find it really satisfying to build craft something for Darkness 100, tinker with my build, test, do some different testing, then throw it up there and get a win at Darkness 100. I find that to be really satisfying. The game does give you a lot of different tools and mechanics for you to actually use to sort of get this done, right? So there's a bunch of different setups you can use. You can go defense, you can go high life total, you can go evasion, you can go glass cannon, you can go full damage, you can go like crazy high regen. So there are some different sort of ways you can build the character, different mechanics you can use to try and overcome the high difficulty level. So I think that's really cool. I think it's personally satisfying. Obviously, I want to see Scardy and Nixie buffed. I've said it several times. I really want to see them buffed in big ways. And as much as I don't like nerfs, I think Lorien probably needs the big nerf hammer. I don't know. I don't want to see massive nerfs, but at the same time, I think he needs a balance pass at the very least. So, one thing I did want to mention in this section is I'd be interested to know what their balance philosophy is moving forward, right? I've played a lot of loot games in the past where when something's too powerful, they bring down the nerf hammer and they nerf it out of existence. And then all of a sudden, well, you're forced to play with something else in the meta because this thing has been nerfed so hard. And I don't want to see that approach taken with this game. Obviously, some things are overtuned and need to come down, right? I'm not saying that you're never going to see nerfs, right? But I just don't want to see the big nerf hammer come in and just ruin some of these characters, you know what I mean? Just because Lorien's OP now, I don't want to see him become super underpowered in the next patch, right? So the balance philosophy I prefer in these kind of games is to bring up the things that are really weak. Now, obviously there is a sweet spot of, difficulty and power, and they need to try and land that, right? So I think some things need to come down, some things need to come up. I think also, like I was saying before with the fates, the more that I play Darkness 100, the more that I realize that you can stack high life total and stack lifeline at master and then become a tank, and it makes Darkness 100 significantly easier. And I don't necessarily love that as a meta. It's not the only way you can play, of course. You can go glass cannon on some of the characters, like Maris. You can do some glass cannon builds, and I really enjoy that. I don't know if you guys checked out the elusive Maris build I did, but we went into Act 1 Darkness 100 with only 130 life and something like almost 70 evasion, 70% evade chance. Boy, what a fun build, huh? You're a total glass cannon. You can only take so many hits, but man, super, super fun, right? So yeah, just I don't know, balance philosophy moving forward is going to be an interesting one to see how they go about it. Some gear affixes are also like much stronger than others, right? Like I mentioned before, Master and Legend offers just pretty crazy. I think health regen on some characters is also really strong, and life total on some characters. They can really abuse it. Like Kront can really abuse having high life total with his skill tree, for example. Someone like Maris kind of needs some help, though. She has nothing defensive in her skill tree at all. It's all just offense, 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 which, she's a glass cannon type character, so that's her whole thing, I guess. Um, one of the other things I wanted to mention here is the procedural waves probably will change how we build a bit for Darkness 100, because right now, I've mentioned this in one of the other videos I did too. Right now, Darkness 100 Act 2 is like a big puzzle box, right? Once you figure out how to beat the puzzle box, what mechanics and what things can overcome it, then you've kind of solved the puzzle box, you know what I mean? With procedural waves, it gives the game a chance to not have the same puzzle box every time, which means you have to build your character in a bit more of a versatile way. Can I take on close range? Can I take on long range? Can I take single target? Where's my regen coming from? All this sort of stuff. That being said, though, I do think a lot of the builds we did for Darkness 100 will still work, especially if some of the characters get big buffs, which, one of the other things about Endgame I do want to mention here is, as I said before, I think I've done over 300 hours now in Act 2. There are just some gear affixes that literally never drop for me. I've had a single pair of boots with Curse of Slowing on it. It exists. You can roll Curse of Slowing on a pair of boots. I've only ever seen it once in my entire time, right? These are the sorts of things that after a few hundred hours will start to turn you off, right? I'm willing to put in the time, but if I'm not eventually rewarded with what I need or what I want, I am going to get bored after a certain amount of time. Now, obviously, for me personally, a couple of hundred hours, I got plenty of playtime out of it before these things start to really, become annoying. But I think for the overall health and longevity of the game, I think something needs to happen there, and I think maybe the crafting system might be a good answer to that one. I don't know. Let me know if you guys think a crafting system would be really awesome in this game. All right, guys. So that's sort of the overall discussion I want to have. I think overall the game's biggest issue right now is mostly just balance, which I think is a really good sign for the future of this game. Especially considering they've said there's going to be Acts 3, 4, and 5. So if they can get the balance a little bit more in line, I think the future content patches are going to be really, really high quality. I think they've proven with Act 1 and Act 2 that they can build a game that feels polished and feels good. And if they can fix some of these balance issues, I think the game really will. I think it'll take it from like good to great or great to excellent or whatever you want to say. You know what I mean? Like I think it'll really push it up another level. In terms of future content, though, I would like to see one of these acts have something different on the map aside from these little nodes that you kind of travel between. It's cool that you can travel along the map, find nodes, and find buffs, right? I think it'd be cool if one of these acts had a different sort of exploration mechanic going as you play. I don't know what it would be. I'm not a game designer. I'm not sure exactly what it would be, but I think if the game ends up with 5 acts and you're just running map nodes on all 5 of the maps, I think maybe that'd be a little bit disappointing at the end of the day. But yeah. So that's kind of that's going to be the big review for Act 2 here in Death Must Die. Overall, I really liked it. I played way way longer than I thought I would. Ended up doing a whole bunch of videos on it for the channel, which is awesome. And you guys liked watching the videos, so we got a good response to doing Death Must Die on the channel. So of course we're gonna continue doing more videos in the future. There's a patch coming in September, which is the big balance patch, and that's going to have some more content in it, some more uniques, and they said more map events and stuff like that too. The big balance change is probably the big ticket item of that one. We'll see what they do. You can watch me get absolutely destroyed on Scardy with these ants. This is what I'm talking about, man. What are you supposed to do? That's a great place to end the video, I think. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. If you got through to the end of this one, this was a bit of a longer one, so thank you very much. I hope you have an amazing, fantastic day. Take it easy.